Hello students. You're welcome back to this course. This is chapter 3 of this course, which the course is Information Privacy Engineering and Privacy by Design. And chapter 3, it's Information Privacy Requirement and Guideline, right? Okay, now let's quickly move on. First of all, in chapter 2, we've talked about personally identifiable information, right? We've talked about personally identifiable information, and we've defined personally identifiable information. Now, according to NIST SP 800, the way they define personally identifiable information in one of their publications called the Guide to Protecting the Confidentiality of Personally Identifiable Information, they've defined personally identifiable information as any information about an individual maintained by any agency or by information organization or by any organization or by government agency, including any information that can be used to distinguish someone. You can use to distinguish from Mr. A from Mr. B. Any information that can be used to trace Mr. A's identity, like your name, your social security, your number, your date of birth, your passport number, your place of birth, your mother's maiden name, your biometric records, and any other information that is linked or linkable to individuals, such as your medical record, your educational background, your financial record, your employment histories. All of these things amount to what we call personally identifiable information. Let's move on because this course is super big. Okay, this course is big. Now, this personally identifiable information is classified into 4 different segments. We say something that distinguishes an individual is a personally identifiable information. Something that can be used to trace an individual is a personally identifiable information. Something that is linked information, like one information and another set of information together, is a personally identifiable information. And then something linkable to information, something that creates a possibility of linking information, is part of a personally identifiable information. And let's move on quickly. Now we go to what we call personal data. Personal data was first of all, European Union created what we call General Data Protection Regulation. General Data GDPR. General Data Protection Regulation was used by European Union to create a protection mechanism for all information that is being processed in Europe. Now, this General Data Protection Regulation defines personal data as any information related to an identified or identifiable natural person. So any information that helps us to identify a human being, a real human being, called the data subject, or an identifiable natural person. First of all, what is identifiable natural person? Identifiable natural person is one who can be identified either directly or indirectly. Directly, like physically, you can identify this is A, this is B, or virtually you can identify the person. In particular, by reference to an identifier, such as probably an identifier could be the name, an identifier could be the social security number, an identifier could be the identification number, like your driving license number, your passport number, your PIN, your login PIN, and so on and so forth. Your location data could be an identifier, and online identifier could be an identifier also to a person or more factors, to one or more factors specific to the physical, psychological, genetic, mental, economic, cultural, and social identity of that natural person. So personal data will only belong to a natural human being, only belongs to a natural being, according to GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation developed by European Union in May 2018. Okay, let's move on quickly. This personal data, there are 4 key elements that the GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation, has isolated for personal data. For anything to be belonging to a person, to be classified as a personal data, then that thing must have what we call any information. Meaning GDPR considered any data that can be used to identify an individual as personal data. Anything that helps us to identify, oh, this person is this person, is called the personal data. Related to is a phrase. Is a phrase that this regulation, I mean the GDPR, is a regulation. This European Union regulatory body called the GDPR. So this regulation applies to information that relates to an individual on the basis of content. Okay, on the basis of content, there are some individuals that are content creators. Okay, on the basis of content, on the basis of purpose, not only content, on the basis of purpose, what he's doing. You're already known for so purpose in life. You already know that you are, maybe you're a businessman, you are known for a specific business, you're already known for your ideology or for a struggle. You have identified your purpose. So anything related to could become a personal data, because like your purpose, your content creations, your results, the things you've achieved. Okay, all this one covers for personal. Let's move on because this chapter is huge. Then identified or identifiable, anything that can help to identify the particular person is called personal data, belongs to personal. Then a natural person is the 4 elements of a personal data. A natural person, because a personal data is a real human being, so must belong to a real human being, cannot be like a hollow balo. Now let's move on quickly. What are examples of personally identifiable information? Examples of personally identifiable information are government issued identification, like your driving license, your passport number, your birth certificate. You know, your birth certificate, you have a number. Your death certificate also. Okay, you may not consider the death certificate because the person is already gone. Okay, but it's part of identification of the person after you are gone. Your pension number, your Medicare benefit identifiers. Like in the United States, we have what we call the Social Security number, the Medicare, Obamacare, so on and so forth. All these ones, that's your insurance, right? So all these ones are your examples of personal data obtained from government issue identification. So if we number 2 type of personally identifiable information, or sources of examples of personally identifiable information, is your contact information. Your contact information are examples of personally identifiable information, like your email address, your physical address, your telephone number. They are all your contact information, and the people can reach you without meeting you physically. Can use these things to reach you. They are called contact information. Online information, like when you're opening your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, your TikTok, your whatever, all your social pages and your social connect, your LinkedIn, all your social connects. So you need password, you need PIN, you need, you create PIN, personal identification number. You need PIN, you need password, you need. So all these are your personally identifiable information. People can use to trace you. Now your geolocation data, like your smartphone, your smartphones, your GPS devices, and your cameras. They can be used to trace and locate you. Then your device addresses, such as your IP addresses from your network, and your MAC addresses from your computers that are connected to your local area network. They can be used to trace you. They can be used to locate you. They are called device addresses. They form part of your personally identifiable information. Your verification data, like when you call a bank, you want to make a transaction, especially from one country to another country, and you want to buy something online in different countries, and you call the bank to open it for you. Sometimes they close it, they don't let the flow to transaction to take place. So when you get, they kind of ask you for verification purposes. They ask your mother's maiden name, your pet name, your children's name, your high school name, your favorite food, your whatever, all the things that you created while you were opening the account, all the verification process that you've given to them while you were opening the account. So they are used to verify. Your verification data are called personally identifiable data. They can use to know, oh, this is the person, this is the right person. Like even in Google, if you go to different center, you want to open your account, sometimes they ask you to verify from your phone. Okay, because Google will send a message to your phone, and once you verify the account, the email will open for you in a different location. Okay, so these are called verification data, and they are part of personally identifiable information. They are examples of personally identifiable information. Your medical records information, such as your prescriptions, your medical record, your exams, your medical images, all of these are medical records, and they are examples of personally identifiable information. Your biometric and general information, such as your fingerprint, your retina scan, your DNA, they are all examples of personally identifiable information. Your account numbers, like your bank account, your insurance account, your investment, your debit and credit card, they are examples of personally identifiable information. Now let's take a look at sources of personally identifiable information. Organizations also collect and they store PI based on the roles of the individuals in relation to the data collected by the organization. Examples include your parents' name, citizen, whether you're a citizen of which country, employee, where you're working, your consumer, your investor, your patient, internet user, lobbies, and volunteers. All of these, they are sources of personally identifiable information. Now let's go to what we call sensitivity of personally identifiable information. What we call sensitivity of personally identifiable information. Informations are said to be sensitive. Personally identifiable information are said to be sensitive if they can cause, if when disclosed or lost or displayed, they can cause harm, embarrassment, dishonoring, and all of these to individuals that owes those type of informations. So such informations will be classified as personally sensitive, personally identifiable information. If informations, your personal information, that when they are being disclosed to the public, they will bring shame to you, they will bring embarrassment to you, they will make you feel shy, they will make you feel dishonored, they will make you feel when they are compromised, they will bring sort of things, or disclosed without authorization. They will harm you, they can cause harm to you, they will bring embarrassment to you, they will cause inconvenience to you, they will cause unfairness to you as an individual. This type of information, they are called sensitive, personally identifiable information. Now let's take a look at an example of this information that are sensitive. Your social security number is sensitive, your place of birth is sensitive, so not everybody wants people to know where they're born. Your date of birth is sensitive, your mother's maiden name is sensitive, your biometric information is sensitive. Sometimes it's called sensitive, personally identifiable information. You don't want people to know, because when people know about your biometric, they use it to commit fraud, right? Your medical information is sensitive. You don't want people to know about your medical history. Your personal financial information, they are sensitive. You don't want people to know that there's no money in your bank account. Yeah, nobody wants you. At least you want to enjoy the honor or whatever you go. Then the credit card and the purchase card, all of this they are sensitive. Your passport number is sensitive, so they are called sensitive personal identification. Your criminality, if you ever be convicted, is sensitive. Your criminal history is sensitive. You don't want people to know. Okay, you don't want people to know as what happened to you yesterday, some of these things. So they are called sensitive, personally identifiable information. When they are disclosed, they can cause harm to you, they can cause embarrassment to you. You understand? They can cause embarrassment to you, they can cause harm to you, and so on and so forth. So they are called sensitive, personally identifiable information. Now let's move on to non-sensitive. Non-sensitive are those information when they are disclosed to anyone, it doesn't cause embarrassment or harm or inconvenience to you. Examples of informations that are non-sensitive are your individual's name, your name. If someone say, oh, this guy is Deji, or this guy is whatever name, this guy is Yakub, so what? So it's not sensitive. Your work email, your office email is not a sensitive thing. Your personal email may be a sensitive one. Your work address, your office place is not a sensitive one. And then your work phone number, if they give out your office phone number, what concern? So it's not a sensitive one. So, but sensitive ones are the ones that are very personal, super personal, that you don't want the top person to know about. Okay. Now let's move on quickly, because this course is super big. Now let's take a look at information. Look at figure 3.1, information and PII. Information is the big, information itself is a super huge aspect of engineering. Then we streamline it to information related to person. After information, then we streamline it to information related to person. Then after that, we streamline it to personally identifiable information. Then after that, we now streamline it to the sensitive, personally identifiable information. So you can see the sensitive one is inside. It's like it's not called. You can call it a subset, right? A subset of entire information. It's a subset of the entire information. Now let's move on quickly. Now we have what we call categories of information that relates to person. We have personally identifiable information. That's information that leads to identification of an individual, every different unique individual. Information that we can use to identify the various people, various individual, and who they are, where they are from. Okay, then we have another one we call the de-identified personal information. Information that had enough PII removed, that they don't have enough personally identifiable information. The personally identifiable information, most of them has been removed or obscured. that the remaining information does not identify the individual. What is left is cannot actually identify the individual. So there is no reasonable basis to believe that the information can be used to identify the individual. So this type of information is called de-identified personal information. Then we have anonymous personal information. Anonymous personal information is information not related to an identified person. Okay, information that is not related to an identified person or an identifiable person that cannot be combined with any other information or a identified individual. So you cannot trace who this information, this person. The person remain anonymous, is hidden. You cannot. So this type of information is called anonymous personal information. Then we have aggregated information. Aggregated information like group of people. Okay, information elements abstracted from a number of individuals. Like when you're doing survey, this type of information, when you're doing survey or you're doing experiment, or you're doing questionnaire, you share to so many people, aggregated. So this is a group information. Okay, typically used for the purpose of making comparison, analyzing trends or identify pattern. So market researchers, they do this a lot to find out how the product is doing in the market, okay, or what they are not doing well that their competitors are doing better than them. So they use this to kind of find the trend pattern, what people are liking and the pattern, and so on, so that they can go for a close substitute to what they had before. So these are 4 different segments of information: personally identifiable information, de-identified information, and anonymous personal information, aggregated information. Now let's move on to the identification or anonymization. First of all, let's look at the identification of data. Okay, the process of removing or obscuring any personally identifiable information from the general information. Something that we can use to trace you has been removed. So what we have left cannot help us to identify you as an individual. This is called the identification of data. So the personally identifiable information has been removed. What is left is just what is on your record, minimizing the risk of unintended disclosure of the individual, of the identity of the individual, and information about this individual. So what is left? People can no longer they've removed personally identifiable information from all this holistic information. So what is left? People cannot identify who this person is all about. Then we have anonymization of data. Is the process of data de-identification that produces data where individual records can be linked back to an origin. Okay, during the identification, after you remove the personally identifiable information, you remember what is left cannot help us to trace the individual, right? But in this case, for anonymization, the individual records cannot be linked back to the origin. You cannot link it back. You cannot go back and say, oh, is this person, as they do not include the required translation variables to do so. Or it could also be anonymization, could also be seen as a code or other means of association for re-identification which do not exist. So you cannot re-identify the person; they do not exist. You cannot locate or re-identify who the person is. And then anonymization is commonly used by government agencies to release data sets to the public for research purposes, so that you can tell how the government got this information, who are the people that supply them this information. Then it's also useful for system testing, and robust testing involves simulating real conditions as closely as possible, and so it should involve testing real world data. Okay, we use this anonymization techniques to test data when we carry out or simulate data when we carry out research, so that before we go to real world implementation. Okay, now let's move on quickly. Now, re-identification. Re-identification is different from de-identification. Re-identification is a process that re-establishes the relationship between the personally identifiable information or personally identifiable data and the de-identified data. You know, the de-identified data is the one you've removed, the PII that you've removed. Okay, the PII you've removed, you now create a relationship between the PII that you've removed and a new PII, so that we can link the person. It is also, re-identification is also that the organizations can achieve this by using a code or an algorithm. In many cases, we use an algorithm, or we develop a code or a pseudonym. Okay, a pseudonym that can help you regenerate the PII that you have removed before. That is assigned to the individual record with enabling information protected by the encryptions or other means that they might use. Okay, so that's that for that. Now let's move on quickly because we have a long way to go. The anonymization. Anonymization has 4 phases. 1, 2, 3, 4. Has 4 phases. Anonymization of data is a process of de-identification because you cannot trace, you cannot identify who the person is. It's a process of de-identification for which a code or other means of code, algorithms, pseudonyms are used, okay, or any other means of association for re-identification does not exist. So there will be no code, there will be no algorithm, there is no pseudonyms or any other method that can help for the re-identification of PII. You will find it. So anonymization is a de-identification process wherein there is no code or no mechanism that can help you to do re-identification. Okay, re-identification does not exist in this case. They are commonly used by government agencies to release data sets to the public for research purposes. Okay, anonymization techniques are used by government agencies. Then also useful for system testing. We use them for testing anything that we develop before we perfect it and release it finally. Then we say because of processes and operational bodies involved in protecting personally identifiable information, it is more efficient to work with an anonymized data set. It's very efficient to work with anonymized data set because if you reveal the source of the information and the details, then there will be a lot of issues, right? So let's move on quickly. This is table 3.1, examples of privacy risk using aggregation techniques. You can see below grade level, number of students, performance. Below grade level, we have 30 to 39. At grade level, we have 50 to 59. Above grade level, we have 20 to 29. We say total before new students enroll. This total number of students before new students enroll for 3 categories. Then the BE total number of students after new students have enrolled. So below grade level, we still have 30 to 39, meaning no one joined the below grade level. Then at grade level, we still have 50 to 59, no one joined this grade. Above grade level, we now have 30 to 39 as against 20 to 29. So these are anonymization. You can't tell which this kind of aggregated result. You can't tell the personally identifiable information in them. So this is how government releases information for usage. Now let's take a look at figure 3.2, the degree of privacy risk. You know, the degree of privacy risk gets, first of all, we have aggregated group of information. This is the big one at the bottom of the ladder. Then we have anonymous personal information, right? Then we have de-identified personal information. Then we have personally identifiable information. Now this personally identifiable, you say increasing privacy risk. So as you go up the ladder, the privacy risk is getting bigger. It's getting bigger. So we have to do something when we are releasing a set of data to the public. Especially like government agencies, they have to carry out de-identification into the process. So and ensure that there is no code or algorithm that can help in re-identification of personally identifiable information into the message. Okay, so that's that. Let's move on quickly. Now, a fair information practice principle, FIPP. Now, this is like a regulations, right? FIPP for the protection of personal information were first enunciated in 1973 report of the U.S. Department of Health Education and Welfare, and they titled this record as Computer and Rights of Citizens. Okay, so they've published the rights of citizens, the principles, what you have rights to, information that you have rights to, what you can do, what you cannot do. In this case, we have table 3.2, the OECD. O is Organization for Economic and Cooperation, Economic Cooperation and Development. That's OECD. OECD Fair Information Practice Principle. Okay, if you take a look at this table, you see we have different segments, right? Okay, put this one. Okay, we have the collection limitation, we have the data quality. Okay, these are the description. These are the principles that the OECD or the the FIPP, Fair Information Practice Principle, that they've come up with, other OECD. Now you have collection limitation, the extent that you can go to in collecting people's information, the data quality, for what purpose are you collecting how is it relevant to the reasons why you are collecting the data from people, the purpose specification, why are you collecting, what are they going to be used for. All of this they formulated in their regulation. Use limitation, where you can use, how you can use, what subject matter, the authority, the law, how you comply, the specification, the standard that you have to follow. Security safeguards, all of this they provided in their regulation. Openness, the person you are collecting them from must know what you are using it for and how you're going to use it. So individual participation, they must also be involved and be told, and they have to sign agreement that their accountability. This one also has to account for complying with the measures of information disclosure. So all of these are principles that are formulated in the regulations for how information or personally identifiable information could be used and could be treated. Right, now let's move on quickly to this side. Okay, then the OECDs, they have 8 principles. The OECDs, they have what we call the 8 principles of OECDs. I've already said OECD is an organization for economic cooperation and development, right? This was formulated to regulate information and give some guidelines and principles to how information could be used or collected from people and could be used by companies and by all the social media like Facebook. If not, they can be selling people's information and easily, just like that, without consequences. So these organizations have created a regulation or how this information should be collected and what this information and to what guides how the people that you are collecting information from should be carried along and so on and so forth. Number 1 is collection limitation. There must be a limit to what you can take from people, right? Now the companies that are taking information from you, like the Facebook, which is now a metaverse, Facebook and Twitter and all of these companies that are collecting information from people, like Google, which is Alphabet anyway by company in this name, and all these big companies like Apple and all of these that are collecting information from people should only connect them with their personal data. It must relate to their people's personal data, and they need to accomplish a specific business purpose. Whatever you are collecting must meet with the business purpose that you stipulated that you're doing. You must not violate the people's right by disclosing this information to unauthorized people or to unauthorized organization, by sending people's information to organizations like FBI that you're not supposed to. The government organizations should limit collections of personal data to what is needed for example, like this, let's take an example. If you have a government establishment that is taking information from you, they must limit the collection of this information to only the things that they need, only the things that organization. For example, if you go into embassy, your country's embassy, to either your embassy or your immigration office in your countries to get a passport, your international passport that will enable you to travel. Okay, so you see that these are government organizations. These government organizations should limit the collection of your data only to the things what they need it for, because sometimes these guys are collecting information that they don't need. Honestly, Last time I was even asking one guy from the embassy, all these things you are just collecting, printing, putting down. Even the information you are collecting, some of them you don't need them. You don't need them. What do you use them for? We know what you need. Our biometrics, yes, you need. Our names, our passport, and our date of birth, and all of this you need. We know what you need. But sometimes they go ahead to be collecting what they don't need. Seriously. Okay, so one of the regulations or the principles that were developed by OECD is the people or the government organization should focus on only collecting data from individuals that they need only. Don't be just collecting all information about the person, what he wears, the food he eats, what kind of marriage status, and some of this information they are not necessary. They just want to know everything about you. That's it. Everything. Because they design their form in a way that you have to give everything. Your number of children, your this, they are not necessary. They are not necessary. Are you giving me a job? They are not necessary. Okay? Or are you a census office? Are you a bureau of statistics office? Are you collecting data to know how many we are? Anyway, they collect what they don't need sometimes. Organizations should obtain consent from the individual before collecting or processing this information from them. So these organizations should obtain which it should be like we accept it, because collection limitation, there's a limit to what they can collect. That's our number one principles from the OECD regulation. So we say there must be a consent from us. If I don't accept, then you cannot collect from me. Okay, there are exemptions such as data needed for law enforcement or national security purpose. If it's for national security purpose, then there's an exception. Okay, now, number two from the eighth principle is data quality. Now, this principle highlights two concepts, which is relevancy and accuracy. The data quality. The information you are collecting must be very relevant as to the purpose why you are collecting it, and must be very accurate. You cannot collect fake information from people. You must verify. You must know. Okay, like you see a bank, when you give them your house address, they go and verify. They come, right? They ask you to submit your utility bill. They want to check your address whether it is corresponding. So they verify somehow. They want to know whether the information you are giving them is accurate and is very. Number one is relevancy. It's very relevant and it's very accurate. So for information to have high quality, the information must be relevant to the purpose and must be accurate to the reason why it's being collected. An organization should only collect information that is not only relevant to the specific purpose, but also limited to the amount and type of data that is actually needed. You must only collect information that is limited to the purpose. Not only that, must also be limited to the amount and type of data that you actually need. Don't go and collect all information about people because you are an organization. You cannot collect everything about someone because you are an organization. You should streamline what is relevant to you and what is needed. Okay, must be relevant, must be accurate. An organization should ensure not only the data are accurate when they collect them, they should also ensure that the data have integrity and should be maintained as long as the data are held and processed. Okay? Sometimes they collect your passport number. After a while, your passport number changes after 4 years, okay, or after 5 years. They are not updated sometimes. Okay, what they have in their system is way back. You've way past that level, so they should update and ensure that that's the only way the data will continuously and constantly maintain quality. Okay, an organization should provide means for a subject to review and correct personal information. You have to be. I think I've spoken about this. You must be able to review and also update, or else then we are just going back and forth. Now let's move on quickly. Number 3, purpose specification. Organizations should provide notice of the specific purpose for which the personal data are being collected. You must make the people know why you are taking all this thing. People should be carried along. Don't just collect people's data and they don't even know what you're going to do with it. You should know why you're collecting them, what you're going to use them for, how you're going to process them, store them, maintain them, disseminate them, and who you're going to disclose the person's personal data to. And for what purpose is that going to happen? Why are you going to disclose this information if there is such need? And there must be a notice, and we should be aware so that the people will understand that, okay, legally he's supposed to give this information because of XYZ. Then that's what we mean by purpose number 3 aspect of the 8 principles of OECD. And then number 4 aspect of the OECD is the use limitation. This principle reinforces the limit for data processing as well as the expectation of data subjects. The limit that the companies or the organizations or the agencies that collect this information, the limit to which they can use this information, it also places a body on the organization to ensure to assure the person that if this personal information is transmitted or made available to another party, the use limitation remain in force. Okay, you must ensure that when they are transmitted to other people, then you do not violate the limit to which you use these people's information. Number 5, security safeguard. This is very vital. When you collect people as an organization, if you collect people's data, you should enforce the same security mechanism and procedure for your personally identifiable information that you use on your system, on your information system. Okay, because most of these informations are called sensitive data or sensitive PII. Okay, then these safeguards includes the confidentiality of the information, the integrity, the availability, the authenticity of these information. The security measures include the physical measure, the organizational measure, and the technical measure. Your technical measure could include your codes, your algorithm, your pseudonyms, all of these things that can regenerate whatever we are looking at. The technical measures also include your technical controls, your safeguard, and provide countermeasure for any information system that is primarily implemented and executed in your system by your information system through mechanisms that can contain or that are contained in the hardware or software or firmware components of the system. So you should put all these things in place in order to protect people's guarantees people's information, that people's information will be safe. Then openness, number 6. Openness. Organizations should make their privacy policy document readily and publicly available. We can read them online. Okay, this is super. We have to make them available. We can go through your policies, your privacy policies, available in your website, so we can read them. This is how much of openness we are talking about. The OECD lists the following as examples of additional measure: regular information from data controllers on voluntary basis, publication in official registers of the description of the activities with this regulatory body, the processing of personal data, and so on and so forth. So this is what we're talking about. So the information should be made very available and should also be with the regulatory body, whatever you're doing. Now let's number 7, individual participation. As with the principles of openness, this principle implies that there is a user-friendly process for the individual participation. Must be user-friendly, and then people can have access to this information. Participation includes the rights to obtain confirmations of whether the data controller has one's personal data and or has one's personal data communicated to him or her, or challenge the data related to him or her, and have data modifier raised if appropriate. So individual participation, people should also be able to ask questions as to what you've used their information for. The accountability, this details the individual that there is that is in charge, the person that is in charge of the information, that is determining what they are using the personally identifiable information to do, what they are is going to be processed, whether the personal information is going to be processed or used, will be held responsible for ensuring that the data that they have processed have been authorized or are fair enough or have legitimate manner. Okay, so the whole system should be accountable in the way that the person in charge should be able to take responsibility for whatever happens to the information. If there are breaches of privacy, this will raise issues of accountability, because if privacy have been breached, then there's no accountability anymore. Then the controller of the organization will be held responsible. So accountability refers to the accountability supported by legal sanctions, because if there is no legal sanction, then it's not there's no much accountability, because this is when people will be careful as well as to accountability established by codes of conduct and contractual obligations according to law. Now let's go to what the European Union, we say in May 2018 the European Union came up with what we call the General Data Protection Regulation. And what this regulatory body, what they do, this regulatory body has a number of national government have introduced laws and regulations intended to protect individuals' privacy in information processing. So this is what these are government agency, European Union, that helps to ensure that individuals' privacies are protected when the information is being processed. One of the most comprehensive initiatives is the European Union that have come up with this regulatory body, GDPR, approved by the European Union Parliament in 2016. But it came into limelight in 2018. This body came into limelight, but it was approved in 2016. Now the GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation, is designed to do what? To harmonize the data privacy law across Europe, to ensure that all the data privacy laws, they are same across the whole Europe, protect and empower the data privacy of all EU citizens, and reshape the organization, both public and private, across the regions and how they approach the data privacy. Okay, so these are the job of the GDPR regulatory body formed by the European Union. Now, still on the GDP, it applies to all companies worldwide that process any personal data of EU resident, European Union resident. So all the companies, whether you are in Europe or not, anywhere you are, these regulatory laws applies to you as long as you are using the residents, the people from EU, people who are living in EU, you are processing their data. Then it widens to the definitions of personal data compared to prior regulation by EU member states. Okay, so these are just the scope of the General Data Protection Regulation, the scope that they cover. They mandate data protection impact assessment. They must ensure that companies that are processing data will have to go into impact assessment. They have to be checked to see what they are doing and how they are using people's privacy, people's data. Okay, introduce the right to be forgotten, and so it requires organizations to notify the local data protection authority of data breach. So the one of the migration is that if you are using the data from anybody from Europe, if there is data breach, you must notify the local data protection agency within that country within 72 hours of that you've discovered that. So it's just a regulatory body, steady standard. Okay, the U.S. privacy law and regulations. U.S. has different privacy laws that regulate. For example, in 1974, they have what we call the Privacy Act of 1974. And this act specifies the rules that a federal agency must follow to collect and to use and to transfer and disclose an individual's personally identifiable information. So this as a federal agency must follow to collect. So it's not like you just collect any U.S. citizens' data without this federal agency be carried along. There are another laws of U.S. that has to do with privacy laws and regulation is the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act of 2003. Okay, this regulation or act requires entities engaged in certain kinds of consumer financial transactions, predominantly credit transactions, to be aware of the warning signs of the identity theft and to take steps to respond to suspected incidents of identity theft. So this was enacted in 2003 to regulate about identity theft. Then they also have Health and Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. Okay, this one requires covered entities, that's typically medical and health insurance providers and their associates, to protect the security and privacy of the health records that they have. So this one has something to do with health and health insurance, right? And medical insurance and health cases, to protect the data and privacies of individuals' health records that they have, not to disclose. So another U.S. privacy law and regulatory body that they have is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. This one to protect students and their family by ensuring that the privacy of the students' educational record. Okay, as you invest in that, you cannot just come to us and say, oh, we want to see the result of Mr. A. No, we cannot. It's a privacy. It's the basis, right? You cannot disclose people's results to you, okay, except you are part of the family, you are part of the information we collected about the student, like maybe as their guardian or as their parents. Okay, if not, you cannot just come as a third party. You want to have access to the results of the students or the academic track records of the students. Okay, the Graham-Leach-Billy Act of 1999, which imposes privacy and information security provisions on financial institutions designed to protect consumer financial data. Okay, this one was regulations and law designed to protect financial data of individuals in operating with financial institutions. Now, another U.S. law, privacy law and regulation is the federal policies for protections of human subjects. Okay, federal policies for the protections of human subjects, published in 1991 and codified in separate regulations by 50 federal departments and agencies, outline the basic ethical principles, especially privacy and confidentiality in research involving human subjects. Okay, so you can see U.S. have so many privacy laws and regulations. Now, the Children Online Privacy Protection Act, the Children Online Privacy Protection Act, is also U.S. has come up with the regulations on that governs the online collections of personal information from children under the age of 13. Okay, so another U.S. law is the Electronic Communication Privacy Act, generally prohibit unauthorized and intentional interceptions of wires and electronic communication during the transmission phase and unauthorized access of electronically stored wire and electronic configuration. So they also have this stealing from transmission data and all of this. They also have a law. So all these are criminal cases. When you violate these laws, you can be charged. You can be charged to court, and when you definitely lose, and when you lose, you go to jail for this type of violations. Okay, so your country, we're going to talk about your assignment. You're going to tell us for the individual's country, your privacy laws and regulations. You're going to dig them out about your privacy laws and regulations that your country have, and you're going to write about them. So this is going to be your assignment. Okay, one of your assignments, digging out your country's privacy law and regulation. Okay, I'm going to take note of this after this class, and I'm going to upload the assignment. Okay, let's move on quickly. International Organization for Standardization, ISO. This one I'm not going to. ISO is in everywhere. It's in everything, because everything we do, we follow ISO standard. We follow ISO. You publish, we follow ISO journal. Yeah, standard. International Organization for Standardization. ISO is an international agency that develops standards on wide range of subjects, on different human aspects. Okay, and different aspects of life, whether be it health area, security area, data communication, networking, and so on and so forth. So in the area of data communication networking security, ISO standards are developing a joint effort with the International Electrotechnical Commission. So International Electrotechnical Commission, ISO, when it comes to data communication networking and security, then the ISO was jointly working with another body called the International Electrotechnical Commission. Okay, they came up with so many different brochure or guidelines or standards, okay, which we're going to talk about. Now let's take a look at the ISO 2700 suites of standard. Okay, this one was developed for security, right? Deals with information security management system, information security, ISMS information. This 2700, we have 2701, all of them falling under the category of 2700 suites of standards. They are meant for information security management systems. Okay, now the first one is the ISO 27001, which is the ISMS requirement, that a normative standard that provides a mandatory set of steps as part of the information security management. Okay, so in a nutshell, what we are saying, whether it's ISO 2700 or the 2700 suits, therefore information security management system, the 27002 information security risk management system implementation guidance. Okay, then the 27005 is the code of practice of information security controls. Okay, now let's go to ISO. We're going to also talk about 2900 suits. Okay, ISO. So all of these are the different standard that this organization in conjunction with IEC, they've come up with. Is that okay? International Electrotechnical Commission with ISO, they jointly formulated all these standards. Okay, now let's move on to the ISO has also 29100 series of document standard. They've also framed. These ones are for documents that provide specific guidance in implementing privacy protection. The 29 is for privacy. You know, the 27 just now were for information security management systems. Okay, the 29100, 29134, 29151, 29184, they are all for framework. They have something to do with privacy assessment, privacy impact assessment, and so on and so forth. It has something to do with privacy. Okay, personally identifiable information. So the 29100 is privacy framework. Okay, it has something to do with privacy. Then we got the ISO 29134, which is the guideline for privacy impact assessment. Then we have ISO 29151, the code of practice for personally identifiable information protection. See, then we have the DIS 29184, the guideline for online privacy notice and concept. So you can see all the 29 series, all the 29100 series or 2900 series, all of them, they are for privacy. Okay, it's about privacy framework. Whether you're talking about the guideline for privacy impact assessment or code of practice for personal identifiable information protection, or you're talking about guideline for online privacy notices and concept, they are all for privacy. Now let's take a look at this. We have two relations now. We have the risk assessment, we have the control. The 27 is for control because you're talking about information security management system. This is for control, the 27 ISO, because it's ISO/IE. IEC is International Electrotechnical Commission. This International Electrotechnical Commission and ISO together, they formulated this code and guidelines for any information security management system. So this one is for control and this one is for risk assessment. Privacy means risk assessment. 29 privacy impact assessment and so on and so forth. So we have two sections of this, and figure 3.3 is showing the relationship between ISO security and privacy standard. So this is for 2709 code of practice for information security, right? Information security controls. But the 29151 is code of practice for PII protection, personally identifiable information protection. Then the 2705 is information security risk management. This one has something to do with risk management. The 27. The 29 also that has something to do with privacy and manage impact assessment, which is also the same meaning as risk assessment, is the 29134, which is privacy impact assessment. So this 27 series and 29 series, they are for risk assessment, and these 27 and 29 series, they are for control, security control, and both of them put together gives what we call the management system framework. Okay, this management system framework comprises of the 27 and 29. The 2701 is information security management, and the ISO IEC 29100 is privacy framework. So you can see we have 3 segments. This one covers these 2 broad areas. Okay, this one, the 27 and 29 for management system framework. This one for control, 27 and 29. This one for risk management, 27 and 29. Okay, this is the comparison between these 27 and 29 standards that were formulated by ISO and IEC. Now let's move on quickly to still on ISO. ISO 20889 is for privacy enhancement data de-identification terminology and classification of techniques. And this one helps us to focus on commonly used techniques to de-identify or for the de-identification of structured data set. So this standard or guidelines formulated by ISO is for how data should be de-identified. Data sets should be de-identified in order not to trace the personally identifiable information of that person. Now let's go to privacy framework. Privacy framework. Remember, anything privacy is a 29 series, ISO 29100, right? It talks about privacy framework, right? That these frameworks have 2 purposes: provide higher-ed guidance to organizations for identifying and assessing and managing and communicating about privacy risks and solutions. It also serves to introduce and define the key elements and the considerations that leads to other standards in the whole of the 29100 series. Now let's move on quickly. Here is table 3.1, which is ISO privacy principles. This principle looks at the concept, consent, and the purpose, and then looks at data minimization, looks at use, retention, and so on and so forth. It looks at accuracy and quality, openness, transparency, and notice, PII participation in access, and the accountability, information security, and privacy compliance. So this table looks at holistically this, and the objective for each one is enumerated here. Now let's move on quickly because of sake of time. Now privacy framework. The privacy framework is a key aspect of the standard. We say a key aspect of the standard is the identification of the actors involved in the process of PII and their interaction, which consists of the one PII principle, the person that you collected the information from, the privacy stakeholder, the agency or the person or the organization that is collecting the information, then the PII controller. The PII controller is the stakeholder that determine the purpose and means of the PII. Then the PII processor is also the stakeholder that determines what mechanism they are going to use. Then the third party is a privacy stakeholder other than the PII principal and the PII controller. So somewhat different from both the principal and the controller, the third party. So these are the people. Privacy framework. When you are formulating privacy framework, you must look at the principal, you must look at the privacy stakeholder, you must look at the PII controller, the PII processor, and the third party. Okay, let's move on quickly. This is shown here. The controller is here. Then you have the third party that eventually make use of this information. Now, but you see the controller and the processor, they are back and forth. Okay, they give information to each other back and forth because these 2 people, they are the stakeholders. Both the controller and the privacy controller and the privacy processor, they are the stakeholder in the organization. They will determine what they are collecting from this principal. They determine what they are collecting from this PI, personally identifiable information principal. The individual is the personally identifiable, is the person that they are collecting the data from. So the person who is collecting from you, who owns the organization, is this stakeholder. This is the same person as this and also this. The third person is the person who will eventually make use of this information. Okay, so this is called the figure 3.4, the roles and interactions in the ISO privacy framework. Now let's move on quickly for the sake of time. Table 3.4 shows the ISO 29151 privacy control for the potential PI. It looks at, first of all, the control categories and the privacy controls. It explains each of them: organization of information, the human response, and so on and so forth. So you can, the cryptography, access control, the asset management, communication security, and so on and so forth, the compliance, the rules, the regulations, the supplier relationship, information security incident, and so on and so forth. So this table is one of the framework that has been developed by this regulatory body on the what and standard to follow for information security. Then the NIST is a U.S. federal agency. It's an agency in the United States that deals with the measurement of science, measurement of standard, and the technology related to the U.S. government that the U.S. government use, and to the promotion of U.S. private sector innovation. So this is an agency helping the government for everything, for science, for standard, for technology, relating it to how this relates to private innovation. The government's involvement in your innovations, okay, is responsible for how the government gets involved in your innovation. Okay, the NIST Federal Information Processing Standard, they have a subsection which is called the Federal Information Processing Standard. The special publications, they carry out special publication, and they also carry out the internal reports and have worldwide impact assessment as well. So these are the work they do. This is a government agency that helps government and innovations and incubations of things that are developing in the United States. So in the area of information security, this Computer Security Resource Center is the source of a vast collections of data, of documents that are widely used in the industry. So they collect a lot of data or information that the industries are using. So whatever you are doing as a private innovator, or the government have a regulatory body that really has to, that's super aware of what you're doing. As part of the ongoing development of standards and regulations for the information security, the CSRC has extended its concern to information privacy. See, they delve into information privacy. Now, the document produced by the CSRC fall into three broad categories: the privacy controls, the privacy engineering, and the privacy framework. You see, they've delved into privacy. They want to know how companies or inventions are making use of people's data. Okay, now let's move on. Privacy control. It still talks about all the privacy control that we've explained. The NIST document are evaluable. The SP 800-53. This one talks about security and privacy control of information system and organization. And then we have SP 853A. This one talks about assessing security and privacy control in federal information system and organization. So, and so on and so forth. So you can go on and on and on. I talk about this, their privacy, the standard they've created to create privacy on networks. So this is table 3.5, which is a NIST privacy and joint control families, data they've collected, and so on and so forth. Now let's move on quickly. Then we go to what we call the second aspect. Remember, their privacy include privacy control, privacy engineering, and privacy framework. So their privacy engineering deals with what we have studied in privacy engineering in chapter 2 before. It talks about the predictability, the manageability, and disassociability. So this we've explained in chapter 2 that this NIST has developed NIST IRO. This is called NIST IRO 8062. They define three privacy engineering objectives that system designers and engineers working with policy teams can use to help them bridge the gap between high-level privacy principles and their implementation in their system. And that these objectives are predictability, manageability, and sociability. So we've explained these three objectives before. Now let's go to still of privacy engineering, which we've explained before in chapter 2. This table is showing 3.7 alignment of the privacy engineering objective to the OECD. Okay, so they try to check each of the OECD, OECD 8 principle: the collection, limitation, data quality, purpose, specification, use limitation, security, safeguard, openness, individual participation, and accountability. These are the 8 OECD FIPPs, right? These are the 8 OECD FIPPs. So they check them, the collection limitation for the manageability and the sociability, and then disassociability. Data quality fall only in manageability. Data quality, as in how you're managing the data. Data quality has something to do with relevancy and accuracy. So it first with manageability. Your purpose specification, what the data is going to be used for, is predictability. Your use limitation falls under predictability, because then security safeguards does not fall into any of this. Then we talk openness falls under predictability, and then your individual participation falls under manageability. Your accountability must have these three criteria for it to be a good system. Now, additionally, privacy engineering, the other policies they formulated, they include the guideline to protect the confidentiality of personally identifiable information, and also SP 800-188, which is de-identifying government data sets, and then NISTR 8053, de-identification of personal information. So these are all policies formulated by the NIST, which is a government body regulating all the innovations that have been done in the United States. Now, this is the one regulating cybersecurity and privacy frameworks. Okay, the NIST privacy framework is a voluntary tool that organizations can use to better identify, assess, manage, and communicate about privacy risk on the individuals can enjoy the benefits of innovative technologies with greater confidence and trust. So this privacy framework has been developed by NIST, so every organization can access them and make use of them in order to regulate their companies or organization. Privacy framework is designed to provide high-end alignment with the NIST cybersecurity framework. Okay, must align with NIST cybersecurity standard. Is that okay? So in response to a growing number of cyber intrusions at the U.S. federal agency like the FBI, Executive Order 13636, that's improving critical infrastructure cybersecurity, directed the NIST to work with the stakeholder to develop a voluntary framework for reducing cyber risk to critical infrastructure. Now, the framework is a collection of best practices, and then the NIST cybersecurity framework consists of 3 components. Now, the first one is the core, the second one is the implementation tier, the third one is the profile stage. The core provides a set of first cybersecurity activities, the desired outcome, and the applicable references that are common across the critical infrastructure sector in cyberspace. Then the implementation tier provides the context on how an organization views cybersecurity risk and the processes in place to manage that risk. The profiles represent the outcome based on the business need that the organization has selected from the core categories and the subcategories. Okay, so these are the 3 aspects of the cybersecurity framework components and guidelines as proposed or developed by the NIST cybersecurity framework. Okay, so this is a table showing the NIST cybersecurity framework functions and category. Identify. So this is the description. These are the category. Asset management, business, environment, governance. So the identify, all this one covers this area. To protect, what they protect cover this area. What they detect cover this area. What they respond to cover this area, and what they recover covers recovery plans, and so on and so forth. So this is a table showing the cybersecurity framework assessment. Okay. Now let's take a look at this. In summary, this figure summarizes the cybersecurity framework and the privacy framework function relationship. If you look at this is like a flow chart. It looks like, but not really. This block, let's look at this figure. If you look at on the left side, we have the cybersecurity framework. On the right side, we have the privacy framework. Okay, so we see that the pink color is data loss, data security loss. The blue color is information privacy breach. How much information privacy breach has occurred. So for identify, we have to identify how much data security loss we have on the system and how much information privacy breach that has happened. So both the breach that has happened on the system and both the security loss that has happened, we have to identify them. Protect, we have to protect the data security, the data information in our security space, and we have to protect information privacy. Then to detect, we detect the security issues, right? Then under control, we control the private, what information we release. We make information private. Control and inform are for privacy of information. They respond, we have to respond to both security loss, and the privacy breach. We have to respond to both, and then recover. Recover is for security, how much we have recovered. So this is what this figure is showing, the relationship between cybersecurity framework and the framework function for privacy. Now let's move on quickly. The privacy best practices are being given out by NIST. Okay, now let's move on to Information Security Forum, ISF. Information Security Forum is an independent, non-for-profit association of leading organizations from around the world, right? This ISF, its member funds and cooperates in the development of a practical research program in information security. So this is a body that is like what you call like a voluntary organizations happy about this information clarification, assessment, security issues, and their contributions. Okay, the standard of good practice for information security. Standard for good practice for information security. There are 4 layers. The first one is the most significant activity of ISF. The most significant is the ongoing development of the standard of good practice. So the first job of this ISF, that's Information Security Forum, is to create the standard, develop standard for information security. Then the second phase is after they've created this document, is business focused, comprehensive, and it should be comprehensive enough to guide to identifying and managing information security risk in organization and their supply chains. So after they formulated these guidelines should be business focused in identifying, managing any information security risk on a system. The third one is based on the research projects and inputs from its members, and as well as analysis of the leading standards on cybersecurity, information security, and risk management. So the research, this one guideline, 2 mitigating against the issues, 3 doing research to see how this affect the cybersecurity, information security, and risk management. And then the last but not the least is of this forum is to bring out best practices and methodologies and processes and procedures and solutions to meet the need of this forum member, including the large and small business organizations, the government agencies, and non-profit organizations. Information are secured. Okay. Standard for good practice has a high working end and information privacy program. Okay, has high working end and is segmented into 2, high working end and information privacy program. And let's move on. The standard for good practice has 4 different layers. information privacy policies, individual participation, technical controls, and data privacy breaches. So this standard for good practices are four segments, four different segments. Cloud Security Alliance. This is an alliance that was formed to oversee cloud computing and cloud security. Is that okay? So this one has two privacy-related documents from Cloud Security Alliance that are very noteworthy. Privacy Level Agreement, which is a compliance tool for providing cloud services in the European Union, and the Code of Conduct for General Data Protection Regulation compliance. Okay, now let's move on to the last phase. Okay, this is our last phase. So after the Cloud Security Alliance, which provide the code of conduct for how data on the cloud will be protected and secured, and they've come up with two privacy related documents. One of the documents we mentioned, the privacy level agreement, and the code of conduct for GDPR compliance. So this is the end of our work for this chapter. At the end of the day, we talked about the concept of PII sensitivity. We talked of the type of personal information. We talked about OECD, and we talked about the European Union General Packet, General Data Protection Regulation. We talked about US privacy policy. We talked about the ISO. Then we talked about privacy-related standard and document from NIST. Okay, thank you very much for your time. That's all for today's class.